Hi, you've reached Suzanne. Please leave me a message and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. Thank you.
Before we start with the Justice for Suzanne series, I want to give you the heads up on how we plan to go about it. And by we, I mean myself and my partner in crime, Alley Cattails. First and foremost, we want to tell Suzanne's story, not Barry's story. At some stage, i.e. when Suzanne goes missing, it does cross into Barry's story somewhat. And a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about what happened and how it happened, etc. So rather than butting heads, what we plan to do is a type of choose your own path story. So what this means for the viewer is that we will upload 2 stories when there is a branch in the story where it branches off into 2 different choices. And then it's up to you as the viewer which choice or which path you choose to go on. And so in this video, I want to give you an example how a particular path might not be the path that you think it's going to be. And for the purpose of this exercise, I am going to draw data from the defense preliminary hearing, and it's exhibits G through to T. And the document is called Defense Prelim Hearing X Rest 1.pdf, and I'll put a link for that in the description so you can find it. So for this exercise, I'll draw your attention to Defendant's Exhibit T, which is a table of data drawn from Barry's phone. This is location data for the 9th of May, the Saturday before Suzanne, quote, went missing, unquote. And so what I've done is I have entered this data into a CSV file and uploaded it to Google Maps. And I've also put it into Google Studio where you can make animations to move around the place sort of in real time. So we're going to quickly just step through each of these points on this spreadsheet and see how that shows up in the data on Google Maps. And then we're going to compare what we found to what the defense presented at the preliminary hearings. And then finally, we will refer to the arrest affidavit to demonstrate how a path that you think you're on may not actually be the path that you're on. And hopefully you will learn from this exercise how to navigate your way through the series when we give you branches or paths that you can follow to go on different, let's say, journeys according to the evidence files. So what I want you to notice here from Exhibit T is that we have 8 records and they all happen at 2:44 p.m. But it's not the hours or the minutes column we're paying attention to, it's going to be the seconds column, because what we're about to map happens over a period of 14 seconds. So first of all, it's important to understand the average speeds a human is capable of travelling, either walking, jogging or running. Now I pulled this data from Google, so if you don't like it, see Google. However, this is average walking speed for a male is around 5 kilometers an hour, and if you're in America that's 3 miles per hour. An average jogging speed for a male is around 9 kilometers per hour. For Americans, 5.5 miles per hour. And an average running speed is around 20 kilometers per hour. Now, because he's a male, he is a little athletic, but I wouldn't put him at a runner type athletic. I knocked about 5k an hour off that. That's just Barry running flat chat at his current fitness level. And so for Americans, that's 12.4 miles per hour at top speed. If you've already looked at the preliminary hearing records, then you'll probably recognise this diagram. But essentially, it's the last 5 of the 8 records that I just showed you, and I've plotted them here in Google Maps. I also measured the distance between each map pin. And so what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the speed at which Barry must have been travelling in order to make sense of the prosecution's findings. And there is a twist at the end of this, so hear me out before you write it off. The distance between map pin 1 and map pin 2 is approximately 16 minutes. The spreadsheet shows us that 3 seconds transpired between these 2 GPS transmissions. So, to calculate how much distance was travelled in 1 second, we take the 16 metres and we divide it by 3 seconds, which gives us 5.33 metres travelled in 1 second. Next, we plug it into the Google converter and we end up with 19.1 kilometers per hour, or for Americans, 11.9 miles per hour. Which means that yes, he would have to be running flat stick, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. And if it's an open plan living kind of house, then there is no walls to run through. Now, let's rinse and repeat. 19 minutes over 4 seconds gives us 4.75 metres travelled in 1 second. And then we plug that into the converter and we get 17.1 kilometers per hour, or for Americans 10.6 miles per hour, which is still a running pace but not quite flat stick and certainly not impossible. 17 metres divided by 2 seconds gives us 8.5 metres per second. Plug it into the converter, we get 30.6 kilometers per hour, or for Americans, 19 miles per hour. This last pin isn't in the defence exhibit diagram. However, it does show a walking pace to the last GPS location. This time, we're going to step through it in real time. Just note, the first 2 pings happen simultaneously. Let's do that one more time, this time noting the number of seconds between each pin. Now we're going to step through what the defence got wrong, but before we do that I just want to show you that I am using the same data that they're using, minus the simultaneous pings at 2:44.02 seconds. Here you see my pins in Google Earth on the left, and you can see the defence exhibit on the right, and they pretty much match exactly. So, how did the defence come up with a different figure? For the first distance between pin 1 and pin 2, we came up with 11.9 miles per hour. They've come up with 36.5 miles per hour, which is virtually impossible for a human. And the answer is pretty simple. They didn't divide the distance travelled by the number of seconds it took to travel it. Not only are they being disingenuous in how they're displaying the seconds between each of the map pins, making it look like only 1 second transpired, but they're also being disingenuous to what the actual data actually says on their own spreadsheet. In fact, I was being generous because I excluded the first 2 map pins that happened simultaneously and started from the 3rd map pin, which removes 1 second from the equation. You can see that they've repeated the same mistake across the board. Map pin 2 to map pin 3 took 4 seconds to travel 61.8 feet. To get the feet per second, as this form is asking them for, they had to divide the total distance by 4 seconds. And as you can see, they didn't perform this calculation across the entire 16-second period. So, they're either bad at math or purposely trying to misinform the judge. But, as I said earlier, there is a twist. To understand the twist, we need to refer to the arrest affidavit. The prosecution didn't necessarily intend to include this particular data as evidence. We see here on page 2 of the arrest affidavit, it says, since January 2021, and remember, Barry's been interviewed by law enforcement several times up to this point, and he's never admitted this before January 2021. He admits to chasing a chipmunk with a gun around the house while Suzanne was outside bathing. Now on page 71, we get the context in which that came up. He in fact wasn't shown the data, but he's obviously aware that that data must exist, because the investigator asked Barry if Suzanne was still laying out the second time he came back. Barry shook his head and said, "I don't recall that." After a pause, he said, "I don't recall." The investigator then told Barry when he arrived that afternoon, his phone went around the house quite a bit. Barry was nodding his head and saying, and then he was asked, "Were you looking for her?" Barry said, "I shoot chipmunks." "You shoot chipmunks?" Barry said, "Yeah." The investigator said it looks like he was chasing one. Barry said, "Yeah, I was. I've shot 85 chipmunks because they got into my furnace and cost me a bunch of money." Barry even went on to hand over a .22 that he uses to shoot chipmunks. The investigator told Barry that activity would explain his phone behaviour, adding that he left his driver door open in the garage before he went to the first patio. Barry said, and then said, "Yeah, shooting," while nodding his head during the description of movement. He added, "No, I'm shooting chipmunks. I've done that ever since we moved in." The investigator asked if he remembered doing it that day. Barry nodded his head, "Oh yeah." And then the investigators also pointed out that in recent months he has changed critical details about his activities in the 2 p.m. hour on May the 9th in attempts to match the evidence. So you see, that phone data on its own really didn't mean anything to the investigation. It could have been, as some have suggested, bouncy GPS pings. They can bounce off walls, mountains, vehicles. They can bounce off a lot of things. There's a lot of interference between the ground and the satellite. And so that data on its own doesn't mean squat. Except Barry tried to make a story to match it. Now it means something. And it doesn't really matter how the defence tries to explain it away. The fact will still remain. Barry admitted to running around shooting things with a .22 at the exact moment that his wife stopped communicating with everybody and went missing. The data doesn't really matter. It's that Barry said it himself. So this is one example where you might jump down a rabbit hole like we just did and find out you're on not quite the path you thought you were on. But rest assured, you will find out things along the way. Like in this example, we found out that Barry's team are either not quite as smart as they think they are, can't do basic math, or worse, are deliberately trying to mislead the court. Any one of those scenarios is not a good thing for Barry. Those who are invested in Suzanne will find her, and then he'll need a team who can do math. And so I'm just going to leave you with a little math education, not necessarily for my viewers, but for anybody who happens to stumble across my video and think that maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
G'day and welcome to Accelerate Maths. In this lesson, we're going to learn the speed, distance and time rules and how to apply them to real life. To remember the three rules, let's use a DST triangle. Notice that the D, S and T are in alphabetical order. First, let's find the distance rule. Highlight the D. Because the S and T are alongside each other, we'll multiply. So distance equals speed multiplied by time. Now let's use the triangle to find the speed rule. Okay, highlight the S. Because the D is above the T, we divide. Speed equals distance divided by time. Now for the third rule to find the time. Highlight the T in the triangle. Because D is above the S, we'll divide. So the time equals distance divided by speed. Easy to remember? An express train travels 1,500 kilometres in 3 hours. How fast does it travel? Okay, here's the DST triangle. Speed equals distance over time. We know the distance is 1,500 kilometres. And we know the time is 3 hours. So the speed is a super fast 500 kilometres per hour. A snake can attack you in 0.2 seconds if you are 3 metres away. How fast is that? Speed equals distance over time. The distance is 3 metres, the time is 0.2 seconds. So the snake's speed is 15 metres per second.